Good evening, everybody. My name is Brian Hartman. I am the president of Pharus Funding Partners and partners in Pharus Global, our ecosystem of services to help businesses from the cradle all the way to the exit. You can find us at pharusglobal.com. And we are doing Pharus Global live at 5. This is episode number 14 already. Can't believe how fast time is blowing by. Tonight we have with us a very special guest, Rebecca Morehead. She is the founder of Practice Medical Solutions that was established in 2009, 11 years already. That's awesome. She has 25 years in healthcare practice management, operations, and practice workflow. She's a certified coach and certified HIPAA security and policy expert. Yes, we have an expert here, folks. And she's certified in Nutrimetrics consultant as well. And we are excited to have her here. We're going to be talking about tonight the top 3 things you might not want to admit about your medical practice. Imagine that. And if anybody has any comments, any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat wherever you might be, if you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. And we'll be happy to answer those questions. Even if you want to just stop by and say hi, please drop them in the comment and we will be happy to shout out to you. And without further ado, let's welcome Rebecca Morehead. Hey there.
Hi, Brian. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
We are happy to have you. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm excited to jump into this because I'm sure there's probably more than 3 things you might not want to admit about your practice in medical practice, but we're only going to dive into the top 3, right?
Right.
So tell us, Rebecca, how did you get started in all of this and practice medicine and what headed you in that direction?
Okay, well, how much time have you got? No, I'm just kidding. I actually got started many, many years ago in hospital administration and then went to manage an MSO up in Georgia and then ended up back here in Florida where I'm a Florida girl. I'm from here and ended up back here in 2003. Was actually implementing in practices at that time for a huge electronic medical record company. And was in practices all the time, every day, more than 50% travel, and loved it, enjoyed it, and then decided I'm going to go, do my own thing. So I opened a consulting business. Wasn't even going to stay in healthcare really, but my phone started ringing. I started helping independent practices with workflow, with issues they were having within their workflow, operational things, policy building, and it just built a consulting business around that. So it's been 11 years now. It's been great.
That's awesome. So it sounds like it happened by default. It just happened to come about from everything else you were doing, right?
It did.
That's awesome. So 11 years later, here you are and helping a lot of medical practices out there. So just curious, how crazy did you go during the ICD-10 phase?
Yeah, that was a pretty crazy time. We have these decades of craziness. We had the 2000 where everybody thought the computers were going to crash, and then we went to ICD-10, and now we're dealing with a pandemic. It's just something every few years that we deal with in medical practice life. So who knows what the future holds?
Well, hopefully we're going into a better direction than what 2020 was, right?
Absolutely.
It's a little bit crazy this year. So I am curious. Everybody's got to be curious at this point. Tell us about the top 3 things you might not want to admit about your medical practice.
Well, it's kind of interesting because when you get behind the front desk and you start getting into the minutia of the back office and working with the practice manager, the coach in me starts coming out, and they just sometimes unload on me the things that are going on. And so I tried to really fine tune the top 3 things. And I think the first thing that they might not want to admit is we can't keep good staff. There's a lot of turnover.
I bet you hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? What creates the issues?
I knew you were going to ask me that. It could be because I primarily deal with independent practices. So they're not hospital owned or conglomerate owned. They're really independent. They're staying solopreneurs, or there are a few doctors within a practice. So one of the things I've seen is, sometimes they don't have benefits to offer their employees, and those employees will leave to go somewhere else where they can get benefits.
Wow.
It could be something as simple as the culture of the practice. They just don't fit in to the culture. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of turnover, Brian. So, it could be that they want insurance and they can't get insurance, or they want more days off, or they need more flexibility with their schedule. There's a lot of different reasons for that.
And that's where one of the areas that you could come in and help medical practices to navigate around that.
Sometimes, I do tell them best practice scenarios of what to do. I provide suggestions, and they do lean on me to ask me things like that. Sometimes it's just good, simple advice of what I've seen in my experience, and what works and what doesn't. So, I do help them with it, but it's not often a consulting thing. It's really an advice thing.
Gotcha. So we talked about the staffing, and what were the other 2 things people might not want to admit?
They might not want to admit that they're not HIPAA compliant.
Everybody goes like this when they hear that, right? So let's talk about that. Why do you think a lot of practices are not HIPAA compliant?
I think that they want to be, but HIPAA compliance is often seen as something very similar to insurance or prevention measures. It's not one of those tangible things. I do this, I'm going to get this. It's I'm going to do this and hope I don't get fined. It's like OSHA or other trainings. That's just going to. It's just because they say we have to do it. I'm going to do it, but I'm going to kick and scream about it. But truthfully, that may be one of the things that they don't want to admit. Maybe they train their staff, but maybe they haven't taken the other 2 measures of doing their risk assessment or building their policies and procedures to match all of that. I find that a lot of practice managers have everything up here. They know what they do operationally. You could wake them up in the middle of the night and they could tell you, they could spit it out what they do. But having it written and having a policy written about what you do is what they want to see for enforcement.
So it's like the classic case of they stick their head in the sand and say, it's never going to happen to me that I'm going to get caught. Right? Exactly. All right. So that's number 2. So tell us about the third. We have so far staffing issues, HIPAA compliance. What's the third thing that they don't want to admit about their medical practice?
They need more money.
They
need more revenue.
And that's a big thing that's happening, especially this year. I'm sure it's grown quite a bit this year, right?
Absolutely. A lot of practices were subject to just telehealth. A lot of them shut down completely for weeks. Here in Florida, we've been fortunate with a lot of more openness, but in other states, not so much. So, if there was a revenue issue before, it certainly hit rock bottom this year.
And what before this year, what was creating the issues where practices do actually need more revenue? What are some of the reasons?
Well, one of the things is lower reimbursement. So from insurance, lowering what they reimburse the providers for. And having to see more patients to get the same income. So that's one of the things. There's other factors that weigh into that. But of course, this year it was a major pandemic in the midst of everything. So there's several factors that weigh into that. And when you look at a practice that wants to increase their income, like we are seeing that practices that add ancillary services could increase their revenue by as much as 15%.
Gotcha. Quick shout out, Rob Converse says, rock bottom, great point. Thanks for joining us, Rob. I'm glad you can be here. So now we have practices looking to generate more revenue. They probably need it more than they need air at this point, a lot of them, unfortunately. But I guess the question I have for you, prior to this year, were you seeing more of physicians coming back out of the hospitals again versus, a few years ago they were selling out to the hospitals? What are you seeing more of this year, or before this year, I should say?
Yeah, before this year, I was seeing a trend of physicians coming back out of the hospital and opening up practice again, or doing a split, where they're a hospitalist at the hospital, but they're also seeing patients in the office. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot more of that, or I was before the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm. And this year, the trend's going the other direction?
Well, I think they're just trying to breathe. They're trying to make it. I would think that going forward, when we come out of this, that we'll go back into that trend. You probably see some of that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're starting to see, I think what's going to ultimately happen is kind of like the C-level folks that might be let go, or they might be forced into early retirement, and now they're doing business consulting, starting their own companies. I think it's similar in the medical side, where the physicians might, first of all, they're probably tired of having a boss, working at the hospital. So a lot of them are starting to find their way back out of the hospital to go independent again. Right?
I agree. Mm-hmm.
So, touching back on the HIPAA compliance, we didn't. One question I wanted to ask is, what amount of fines could be assessed for privacy breaches?
Well, you're sitting down. So for 1 year, a practice could be fined as much as 1.5 million.
Holy moly!
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're still putting their head in the sand, like nothing's gonna happen to us, right?
Well, obviously that has to add up, so the fines start at $100 per violation for how many are involved, and then it goes up from there. Was there reasonable cause? Was there willful neglect or malicious intent? I mean, it goes all the way up to even prison time, and that's employees, not as well as the physician. So everyone's responsible, and yeah, it can add up. It's happened. HHS has what we call a wall of shame with a lot of providers on it that, for whatever reason, were caught with breaches.
And the problem with that is knowing that they already need working capital and additional revenue. When they get hit with these fines, it's not like they have a nice little cushion somewhere where they can pull the cash to pay these fines, right? So right. It kind of doubles up on them, I guess, right?
Right, it does. And, one of the things I always recommend is have a cybersecurity policy. It's not very expensive, but just get one so that at least you're covering yourself if you do have to go into some type of litigation over it.
I believe there's companies out there now that do cybersecurity kind of analysis, or like a free check to make sure there are no holes in it, and that way they know that they're okay. I would probably it's something that every business should do out there, I would think, including medical practices.
Absolutely. One of the misnomers is the staff. One of the biggest breach areas is with the staff. And it's not that they're intentionally doing it, Brian. It's that they download something, or they're on Facebook at lunchtime on the work computer, or they're downloading an email and they click on a link in that email and then they download something. And that's where it usually happens. It's not an intentional thing, and they've gotten so good with these emails at enticing you to want to click on them. That's how it usually happens.
Oh yeah, we get those pop-ups and different links all the time, and more and more people are on social media, so it's more of a possibility these days.
Exactly.
Scary. So this year, more than ever, I would imagine, and you talked about it a little bit earlier, a lot of practices were forced to go to telehealth. So are there guidelines on telehealth for the practices?
Well, it's kind of interesting. HHS put out a discretion guidelines on telehealth this year due to the pandemic, meaning they were going to relax the penalties and fines for not being HIPAA compliant during this pandemic and using telehealth solutions. So yeah, they provided some basic guidelines, basically using good faith, using good judgment, not doing a live situation for your telehealth, not using sources like that, but using non-public facing solutions. And then, of course, doing your best to be compliant with HIPAA guidelines, and then moving forward into that phase where you are compliant as soon as you can. So, yeah, there was some stipulations with that. I did a whole video series on that just last week. So if anyone wants that, they can reach out to me. I'd be happy to send it.
Awesome. Another quick shout out to our faithful viewer, Louis DiRamondo. Every time that we have a show, he's out there, allhotdogcarts.com. He's got the best hot dog carts you ever seen. Like the Lamborghinis of hot dog carts out there. So thanks for joining us, Louis. For those of you watching, if you do have any questions, comments, want to just say hello, drop it into the comments section. We'll be happy to answer any questions. So Rebecca, I've known you now probably close to at least 5 or 6 years at this point. And I know that you're always helping medical practices find ways to generate more revenue. And so tell me why and how. How do you go about doing that for medical practices?
So Brian, I niched into a special market about 7 years ago with a company called Nutrimetrics, and I'm a certified Nutrimetrics consultant, meaning I've gone through the training with the company to implement quality wellness solutions into practices. So it's a very customized approach where we go through a discovery, a very short discovery with the practice, and determine what would be the best avenue for their patient base. And sometimes we even do a survey with the patients to determine, if the provider started offering products or services here, would you be interested in that? Is that something you would like? And every time we've done that survey, believe it or not, it's been overwhelmingly over 60% of the patients say, yes, I would like my provider, to recommend something for me. Wow. So we do that. We do a discovery. We determine where that practice is going, what their goals are, and how we can align with our products and services. Because I'm a broker. I don't manufacture or make products. I work with a company that brokers products. So we broker products and services for those practices to offer to their patients that are quality based.
So I would imagine that the products can vary depending on age brackets of their patients and things like that. What are some of the other, what are some of the products, and how is it determined what the practices use?
Absolutely. So they could be based on age. So there's a whole children's line of products. There's a whole anti-aging line of products, so both ends of the spectrum there, and everything in between. So from performance and enhancement of performance and physical endurance, products that are geared to that, as far as those types of things. One of the products, I have one laying here. This is my go-to here. Basically, what the company is so unique about is the delivery system. So this is a foundational product that everyone would just take every day, and it gets in the bloodstream with about 8 to 10 minutes. So it matches the same pressure as our body fluids. So it's a powder. When you mix it with water and drink it down, it actually is the same pressure as our body fluid. So it goes right on into the small intestines, and it's readily bioavailable to the body within 8 to 10 minutes, and up to 95% absorption. So basically, this is a foundational product and could add as much as another 100,000 a year to a practice with a 3,000 to 5,000 patient base. So that's what we do.
So you're saying that a practice that has 3,000 to 5,000 patients, that just that one product alone could add another 100,000 in revenue?
Yeah, and we're being very conservative with the conversion. So we're just looking at converting 10% of the practice base.
That's amazing. So that could be significantly higher than 100,000, depending on how many patients, and since you're being conservative, it could really be a couple 100,000 or more.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's unbelievable. So I know you've also been working a little bit with DPCs. Did you want to talk a little bit about how that's all progressing, and what are some of your thoughts about direct primary care?
It's an interesting model, and I see a lot of practitioners being very enamored with the model because it does give a lot of freedom and flexibility. It gives providers more time to spend with the patient. I mean, they're not so rigid with I gotta see so many patients, because the more patients I see, the more money I make. It's more flexible, and it gives more flexibility and time to both the patient and the provider and the staff as well. So that provider who really likes to spend time educating their patients, that's a good model. And if they want to be home at night, not sitting there documenting in their EMR all night long, this is a good solution for them. I highly recommend looking at it. And there are hybrid models for insurance and totally cash based. So yeah, it's a growing model, and I've been working here in the Central Florida area to enhance that growth here in the area.
So it sounds like being hybrid, for the practices that are only accepting insurance, they can add on the direct primary care model for concierge cash pay. And those that are already DPC model can add on insurance if they choose to.
If they wanted to. Most of them that are all DPC, meaning all cash-based or concierge-based, don't typically want to take insurance. They want to stay that way. But there are practices that may want to incorporate some type of a hybrid into their practice. So that's very doable.
So it sounds like from a patient point of view, potentially they can let go of their health insurance and be able to have a membership in the direct primary care practices instead, right? Or have some kind of combination?
Or have some type of combination. Yeah, I definitely think that anyone would want to have a catastrophic care, for hospitalization. But if they're not that person that's going to the doctor all the time, that might be a great model for them.
And now if the practice is more direct primary care, they have more time to be able to devote also to the other products you were talking about, like nutraceuticals, if they wanted to bring that in, or other revenue generators. They'll have more time to be able to focus on that.
Absolutely.
So with more time to be able to devote to that, obviously can generate more revenue for the practice.
And more free time, Brian. I believe, doctors are humans too, and they have families, and they want to have a life. And so it's a good blend.
Yeah, and it sounds like it might eliminate some of those staffing issues that we talked about as one of the top 3 things they don't want to admit, right? Because the staff might be a little bit happier having a little bit more time freedom, right? And not be so stressed out. I wonder if that would also work well from a HIPAA compliance standpoint. Maybe they could spend more time in that, focused on that as well, right?
Yeah, well, one of the things that cash-based or concierge practices sometimes think that the HIPAA compliance doesn't apply to them, but it does. And so it applies to all providers, covered entities. So yes, it would give more time, more leniency to build those policies, customize the procedures, those types of things.
Awesome. I think we covered everything, Rebecca, that I wanted to go over. Did you have you thought about anything else that you would like to add, or something that we might have missed?
No, I think that about does it. I mean, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to help and assist and provide answers if I can.
And you guys can see Rebecca's information there at the bottom. It's Rebecca Morehead. Her email is rebecca@rebeccamorehead.com. 407-878-3137 is how you can reach her. Even right now, if you want to pick up the phone and give her a call, that phone will be ringing. And Rebecca does answer her calls. So thank you very much for joining us tonight on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun learning about the top 3 things you might not want to admit about your medical practice. I think with Rebecca's help, we could kind of put those 3 things to rest and help them fix it, right? That
sure would like to. Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure. Pleasure was all mine. If anybody would like to be on the show, we do this every Tuesday night live at 5, which means 5:00 p.m. for those of you curious out there. I'm happy to speak with you about it. You can find my information at pharusglobal.com. We're right here at 1859 Southeast Port St. Lucie Boulevard in Port St. Lucie. So you're welcome to drop by as well. We do have some spots coming up in the not too distant future. So if you'd like to be on the show and tell us about what you do and how you got to this point, we're happy to have you. Rebecca, thank you again. And we appreciate everybody joining us. And we will see you next Tuesday night. Have a good night, Rebecca.
Thank you. You too, Brian.